Mr. Chair, meeting is live now.
All right, great. Welcome everybody tonight, August 24th, for a special meeting of Halifax West Community Council. Before we'll first call the meeting to order and do a quick roll call for our members, starting with Vice Chair Councillor Morse.
Good evening, everybody. Joining you from District 10, Clayton Park.
Great. Hello, Councillor Mason.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Joining you sadly from indoors in District 7, which I was on the back deck today.
Right. Councillor Cleary.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here representing District 9, Halifax West, Armdale.
And Councillor Stoddard.
Oh, you're muted, Iona.
You didn't hear all the wonderful things I just said. Good evening, colleagues and those at home. Glad to be here from District 12.
Thank you. And we have regrets from Councillor Cotto, who may appear tonight, but as of now, we have her as a regret. So moving to approval of the minutes for July 13th, 2021. Can I have a mover and seconder, please?
Moved, Councillor Mason.
Moved by Councillor Mason.
Second, Councillor Cleary.
Second by Councillor Cleary. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. I should have asked if there's any questions or remissions, but I assume there are not. Moving on to our next approval of the order of business and approval of additional additions and deletions. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is no proposed addition or deletion for today's meeting.
All right, great. With that, mover and a seconder for
I'll move
the
approval of the order of business and as presented, no amendments.
Great, thank you. Moved by Councillor Mason.
Second, Councillor Morse.
Thank you. Second by Councillor Morse. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Seeing none. Moving on to our next item, business advising over the minutes. I believe there are none. Call for declaration of conflict of interest. Any of those? Seeing none. Motions of rescission. There are none. Motions of reconsideration. There are none. Motions of rescission. There are none. Consideration of deferred business. There are none. Notice of table matters. There are none. And moving on to why we are here tonight, which is our hearings. 10.1.1 case 22115 development agreement to allow a multi-unit residential building on a registered heritage property at 2438 Goddison Street, Halifax. And I will read the statement first because I never do it, so I'll make sure I follow procedure. Thank you for joining us today for the virtual public hearing. The order of events for this virtual public hearing will be the same as a regular public hearing. We will start with a staff presentation, give the applicant an opportunity to present up to 10 minutes, and then go to the public hearing speakers list. As a reminder to all speakers and those watching from home, in order to have signed up as a speaker, the deadline was 4:30 p.m. the day prior to the hearing. There are 19 speakers that have registered for this public event, and I believe no one has sent their regrets as of now. So moving to our first part of this hearing is ask for Mr. Aaron Moynihan to give us presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to members of Halifax and West Community Council and members of the public that are here this evening. Just going to share my screen here. And just let me know, Mr. Chair, when you can see that.
All good to go. All
right. We're here this evening to discuss case 22115, which is an application for a development agreement at 2438 Goddison Street in Halifax. The applicant in this case is Fathom Studios on behalf of Joey Arab, who is the property owner. The location, as I mentioned, 2438 Goddison Street is a registered heritage property known as Victoria Hall. The proposal is for a development agreement to allow the construction of a 13-story multi-unit apartment building containing up to 130 units in the rear yard of the existing registered heritage building And I should remind Community Council that this application was also considered by Regional Council as a substantial alteration to the heritage property, where they considered such issues as removing the rear wing of Victoria Hall, rehabilitating the existing structure, and the design and location of the 13-story building in its rear yard. In terms of context, you can see here on the left the site boundaries in red. The site is located between Goderson Street and Creighton Street. We also have North and Charles Streets to the north of the site, and Buddy Day Street to the south. The site is 3,200 square meters in area, or about 35,000 square feet. So it's quite a large lot with frontage on both Creighton and Goderson Streets. It was in the residential multiple dwelling zone and the high density residential designation at the time of its application under the Halifax Peninsula Land Use Bylaw. And we'll be considering the policies of the Halifax Secondary Municipal Plan in evaluation of this proposal. It's also surrounded by a mix of residential and institutional building forms from 2 stories in the immediate area to the west, as well as a 10-story building immediately to its south, and the green space of the George Dixon Center across Goderson Street. And as I mentioned, because the application was initiated prior to the Regional Center Plan Package A coming into force, which it is now a part, it is being evaluated under the former policies. Here's some site photos for some additional context. The image on the left is, of course, that iconic Victoria Hall as seen from Goderson Street. And the photo on the right is the Creighton Street frontage, which is used currently for surface parking and also a small garden used by residents of Victoria Hall. In terms of the site plan and the proposal details, the site plan is shown here. We have Victoria Hall on the right, with Goderson Street to the far right of this image, and the new development to the left in the rear yard of the existing registered building. The surrounding area will mainly be landscaped green space and pedestrian circulation areas, also with some significant landscaped areas on the roof and terraces of the new development. As I mentioned, it's for a 13-story residential building containing 130 units, an additional 30 units within the rehabilitated Victoria Hall building. A minimum of 40% of all the units on the site must be 2 or more bedrooms as per the development agreement. There will be 2 levels of underground parking, totaling 62 vehicle spaces. And there is a requirement to complete all of the approved heritage rehabilitation work that was outlined in the substantial alteration approval and further detailed in Schedule E of the development agreement. In terms of the existing policy and bylaw overview, this site did exist in the high density residential designation, which encourages a mix of residential uses, including multi-unit apartment houses. Was also in the R3 residential multiple dwelling zone, which permits up to 250 persons per acre as of right in multi-unit residential buildings. And this site could have allowed a building up to the rampart maximum as of right, which would be approximately 16 stories if it was developed under the land use bylaw. The enabling policy for the development agreement, which you'll be considering, is policy 6.8, also known as the Heritage Development Agreement Policy. And the map you see on the left also shows the expanded boundary for the public notification used for the public hearing, which is about 150-meter radius around this site. In terms of that enabling policy that I mentioned, policy 6.8, it's quite a flexible policy. Its purpose is to allow land use flexibility to encourage the adaptive reuse of heritage buildings. And it enables a development agreement for any development or change of use not otherwise permitted by the land use designation and zone, so long as the registered heritage property is not altered in any way to diminish its heritage value, that any development must maintain the integrity of the registered property or streetscape in which it's a part, that the impact on adjacent uses such as traffic generation, noise, hours of operation, parking requirements, and other land use impacts are minimized, and that any development substantially complies with the policies of the plan, in particular heritage objectives and policies. We also have the standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada, which were adopted by Regional Council in 2014 as our conservation standards to evaluate any changes to heritage properties in the municipality. Staff completed a thorough review of the standards and guidelines as part of both the substantial alteration application as well as the planning application for this site. Most pertinent to this particular development is Standard 11, which states that any new work must be physically and visually compatible with, subordinate to, and distinguishable from the heritage place. So staff advise in this case that they found that the proposal is appropriate, given that its size, its step backs, its color scheme and articulation all provide a appropriate backdrop to Victoria Hall and do not subordinate the historic place. This was also backed up by a recommendation from the Heritage Advisory Committee in June of this year, which came to the same conclusion on this application. Just to take you through some of the evolution of this design, originally in October of 2019, when we held the public information meeting, this was for a 19-story proposal. It was subsequently found that that exceeded the rampart maximum heights for this area. So the development was subsequently lowered to 16 stories in June of 2020. It was then brought through the substantial alteration process, and Regional Council at that point agreed with staff's assertion that this was simply too high for the site and did not comply with Standard 11. Subsequent to that recommendation and also feedback from the Planning Advisory Committee, the design was lowered to 13 stories in March of 2021. And then following a detailed staff review and following additional comments from the Heritage Advisory Committee, the design was further altered to increase the step back above the street wall on Creighton Street, to lower the size and bulk of the mid-rise portion of the new development, and also to decrease the tower portion by about 10 feet. Here are some renderings of the proposal. On the left is the proposal as seen from the public right-of-way on Gottingen Street, looking generally to the southwest, with Victoria Hall in the foreground. Then you see on the right-hand side the proposed amenity space between the two buildings, and the two buildings are proposed to be separated by about 20 feet. And here we see some views of the proposed Creighton Street street wall and the tower over Creighton Street. And these renderings are also in your report package. In terms of public engagement, a public information open house was held on October 24th, 2019. As I mentioned, that was for the 19-story iteration of the proposal. There were 22 residents which attended that event and provided comments to staff, and those comments are summarized in your report package as well. A webpage on the proposal on halifax.ca has been kept up to date. There were 2,185 people who viewed the webpage as of the time of this public hearing this evening. 14 community organizations were directly notified of the proposal. A mail-out notice was sent originally to 497 residents to notify them of the open house, but subsequently we also sent the public hearing notice to 1,099 residences in the surrounding area. We received 6 written responses to those 497 letters. The feedback that we did hear, both at the public information meeting and through that correspondence, included the need for more affordable housing in the area, that local residents should be given an opportunity to work on the development and within the building once it's constructed. Concerns about shadow and wind impacts of the new high-rise building on the surrounding area, and the impacts of construction noise, dust, and traffic. In terms of the approval process, it has been a fairly lengthy process for this application. Of course, we had the 2 parallel processes of the heritage application as well as the development application. We started with a preliminary review of the proposal, of course, the public notification and engagement, which included that open house meeting. The Planning Advisory Committee considered the application, followed by a detailed staff review. We drafted the development agreement and brought that to the Heritage Advisory Committee in June of this year. First reading was held, and of course, today we're at the public hearing, and this evening, Community Council is expected to make a decision on this proposal, which will be followed by a 14-day appeal period. And here is staff recommendation for Community Council's consideration, which of course is detailed in your report package. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Are there any, let me open the chat. Are there any questions or clarifications from members at all? Seeing no one speaking up. Two really quick questions before we get to the public hearing. And you might not have this answer, Aaron. So considering what's already approved within package A and potentially with package B, this proposal was completed under an old policy. Well, not old, well, I guess an old policy. If this was to happen today with using the Heritage BA policy, would the large tower aspect be allowed on the site where it is, or would it have to be placed somewhere different?
So it would not be allowable as of right under the current center plan zoning, but that was done very intentionally. So every registered heritage property within the regional center plan area was essentially downzoned to either 8 or 11 meters of maximum height, essentially to encourage those property owners to go through this development agreement process to ensure that what they're proposing is consistent with the standards and guidelines and consistent with what we would expect on a heritage property, and to ensure that those heritage properties are not put at risk by increasing their as of right development rights.
Right.
So if we look at the previous zoning, which was R3, as I mentioned, that would have allowed a pretty significant building on that site, upwards of 16 to 17 stories.
Thank you for that. And then going back to the policy itself, so thinking of the intention of the policy to allow for heritage restoration and then to give rights to piggyback off that, and the applicant might speak more on this piece. When you look at the policy as a whole, are these the type of applications that you hope to see, or are these type of applications that the policy is intended to be used for in general sense?
I would say that staff generally feel that this application is consistent with the intent of the policy. I will say that this is the largest development agreement proposal that we've seen under this policy, likely in the 40-year history of this particular policy. Typically, we see, small additions to 2 or 3 story residential buildings. In some cases, we see some larger additions to institutional buildings, but this is, in terms of high-rise development, the largest that we've seen. But certainly, this is a large site at 35,000 square feet. It's probably one of the largest opportunity sites for infill development on a registered heritage property that exists on the peninsula. So in that sense, it's fairly unique. The height is not necessarily out of scope with some of the other developments that have been proposed in the area under the Schedule Q development agreements in recent years. So I would say that staff are generally feel that this is consistent with policy.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Not seeing anybody else in the chat. So I will come back to my agenda here and open the public hearing and invite the applicant to address council. And from the looks of it, we have Chris Crawford and Rob LeBlanc on behalf of the applicant. Just making sure that we have both of you here this evening.
We're here and you can hear me fine?
Yep, I hear you, Rob. And is Chris also here tonight?
I'm here. Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yep. Great. All right. So you have 10 minutes and the floor is yours. Thank you.
All right. Aaron, we're going to share your screen. Is that right? Or do you want me to share mine?
We will be sharing your slides.
Okay.
Please give me a moment, please.
Okay.
All right. We'll make sure your time doesn't start yet.
All right. Thanks, Lindell.
Just want to confirm that this, okay, maybe not. All right, just confirming that this is your presentation.
There we go. That's the one.
All right, great. Floor is yours.
Okay, thanks, Lindell. I'm going to walk through, if we go to the next slide, I'll provide a brief context for this proposal, and we'll talk a little bit about the site conditions, traffic, microclimate, and surroundings. And then I'll pass it on over to Chris, who's going to look at the more interesting stuff, the heritage and the overall building design. So if we go to the next slide. And next slide, sorry, context and planning. We all understand where this site is. I think within the context of downtown Halifax, this is in an area that's within about a 5 to 10 minutes walk of the downtown. It's on a major transit route and is also located in the Halifax Peninsula area. And as Aaron mentioned, it's subject to the old policies of the Peninsular bylaw. And if we go to the next slide, just a kind of a 3D shot of the site. You've got on the left-hand side, Uniacke Square and the park right across the street, and shown in blue down at the bottom, right next to Sunrise Manor, the 10-story next door, gives you a bit of the context of the site. But we're excited. It's very close to schools in the neighborhood. It's close to open space networks, active transportation links. It's on a major transit corridor on Gottingen Street and within walking distance of many parks in the area. And of course, close to the downtown and not far across the street from the Halifax North Memorial Library, just down the street from the Mi'kmaq Native Friendship Center, and new buildings that are coming up like Velo just down the street from us. So we're excited about this location. And if we go to the next slide. As we mentioned, we began the design process for this in 2018. Under the old standards. So these are the angle controls that would have been applied under the old bylaw. And effectively, we were able to fit a 16-story tower. And this site allows for about 250 persons per acre. So we were just under that in terms of a person count on the site. And as Aaron mentioned, we moved in 2019 to increase the height to 19 stories before finding out that the rampart heights only permitted the 16-story. So this design has gone through quite a number of iterations, and we've had the benefit of working with the local councillor and with the local community to get some feedback on the massing and overall building design for the site. If we go to the next slide. I won't get into the details of the policy. Suffice to say that, the Heritage DA process is an exciting opportunity for heritage property owners to look at preserving and restoring these heritage buildings. And that's done through a process of getting some extra density. I think as a planner, I would love to see in the future the transfer of development rights opportunities. So the ability to not have to build density right on this site, but to transfer it to another site that can accommodate more density. But I understand that's not possible now, but something that I hope the city is looking into in the future. Next slide. And I won't read this stuff. Let's go on to the next slide. I'm trying to get you to the exciting stuff with Chris. Site conditions, when we're looking at wind impacts, solar impacts, microclimate, we're looking at the extent of larger buildings around the site. And as I mentioned, just to the south of the site, we've got the 10-story manor building, but there's a number of quite tall buildings in and around this area, and these all impact the wind conditions. So if we go to the next slide, without getting into the complexity of this, we modeled through a computational fluid dynamic model, which is a computer simulation. In the very top left corner here, we're modeling the existing conditions that we could expect when wind comes from the north. And just to the right of that is the proposed, the anticipated future conditions that might result from this new building. And then as we go to the next set of slides, when the wind comes from the west, we're modeling existing conditions. And in going through those simulations, we expect there, when wind does come from the west, it'll be slightly windier to the parking lot to the south of us, and we'll experience slightly windier conditions on Gottingen Street, all have which been accommodated in the building design. And we're also looking at the sunlight and shadows. And so this is taken at the equinox, so September 21st and March 21st conditions. And these are the shadows that we might expect. So the school just kitty corner to this site at 8 a.m. has some new shade that is cast on it. And we don't expect in Uniacke Square a whole lot of additional shade up till about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then we have a couple hours of shade. So those all play into the human thermal comfort conditions that we would expect result from this new building. Next slide. I'll pass it over to Chris, who will take on the heritage.
Yeah, so I think Aaron covered a bit of this, and we've certainly gone through a lot of work with their team and are really kind of happy with the way things have gone, but it has predominantly revolved around the restoration of Victoria Hall. And I think we all have a picture of this building in our minds of the way it is, but it is actually in quite a state of need right now. So there is an extensive restoration that's being planned for this project, and maintaining this kind of grand front yard and really putting the dollars in to not only restore it cosmetically, but make sure that the building is a healthy building, which will continue to kind of increase the lack of need of renovating it in the distant future. The building has a really rich history of additions and removals, and I think that actually kind of plays in well to the idea of adding some new units on this site. But really the biggest piece of this was getting that separation between Victoria Hall and this new structure. And I know in the renderings that we've looked at and we'll look at in the future, it feels like it's attached to the building, but it renderings are deceiving sometimes. It actually will have quite a bit of space between the two of them. So we're really happy with the way that the new building will relate to that. Next slide. So we did work pretty closely with Austin Parsons of Parsons Heritage Works. We did quite a bit of investigation inside, even into the building science side of things, on how this restoration can really make this restoration last that much longer. That conservation total right now, and there is certainly a large contingency in that, especially with a building of this age. Once you start to take things apart, there's often a lot more need for renovation and work once you start to take things apart. But we're really confident that this amount will go towards making this building beautiful for the next 100 years. So we're really excited about that. Next slide. I won't get into details about the specifics of the restoration. I think just in the nature of time, I think if anyone has any specific questions, I can certainly walk them through that. But it's a very extensive exterior renovation, including new windows, new siding, new roofing. There's quite an extensive amount of work there. And then in the section of the building at the rear where we're removing a previous addition to allow for this new project, we'll have some space there for interpretation on the history of Victoria Hall. I think it's interesting that that people can learn a little bit more about the rich history of a site from the building itself. So I think that'll be a really nice opportunity just to talk about how many additions and renovations have already been done on this building. I think when you look at it from the front, you assume its life. It was always the exact way it was, but that entire south end of the building was an addition, and it went through a number of iterations. So I think it's important for the general public to get a better understanding of that as well. Next slide. So yeah, I'll walk through a bit of the design. I think Aaron did a fantastic job presenting this. We do have that 20-foot separation between Victoria Hall and the new project, and we really worked with Aaron and the HRM team to make this building as great as possible. And as he mentioned in the latest iteration, making that tower footprint smaller and setting it back that much further off Creighton Street. Now we're at 22 feet step back from the Creighton Street wall, which we'll see when we get into the rendering. So you can go into the next slide. Next slide, we talk about pro forma. So I do want to chat about it. Joey is having us speak on this, but they did spend quite a bit of time. Lindell's been a part of that in talking with community there and trying to identify some needs. A lot of these community benefits were originally being proposed to be integrated into this additional height, getting to 16 stories. But I think, this, extra height or extra yield or not, I think it's something that has come up as something that's really important for the community and something that the developer is committed to execute. This can't be written into the development agreement, which I struggle with greatly. I think there has to be a way that this could be legally written into a DA, but we've gone through that process and it's been determined that we can't connect this heritage DA to hold the developer to do any of those things, but these things will be done, and we worked with the developer and the community to do them. This one is showing a community space that will exist in Victoria Hall, and there's also a commitment to do some affordable units. So in this final iteration, it was 4 units at a maximum cost of 50% of the market rate for 15 years, and then 3 units at a maximum cost of 10% below market rate for 15 years. And of course, the community room that you're seeing here. If you go to the next slide, another image of that. So nice kitchenette area and some flexible kind of workspace presentation area. So the developer is excited and committed to still doing that, even though there'll be no legal tie to him having to do that. We're excited for that part of the project. So we wanted to share that. Next slide, please. So yeah, here's the view of the front elevation from Gottingen Street. And I think a big part of the changes that the building has seen throughout our process was really tied into materiality. It's, again, hard to see at this distance, but the lighter tone material is actually a manufactured stone product. So introducing a little bit more of that human scale materiality to that building, that cut or divide on the front of the building is aligned with the frontispiece of Victoria Hall. So it's paying homage to that. The fenestration of this new addition is paying homage to the traditional kind of Victorian divide of windows, but it's also at a different scale so that it's not making a fake replication of that. Next slide. Another view right from the sidewalk looking up. Next slide. And again, another view from the southern side of Gottingen Street. Next slide. As Aaron mentioned, there is an amenity space that has an outdoor terrace with planting here. And then you can see down below that full separation between this new project and Victoria Hall. In the distance down this kind of corridor space in between here, you can see that section where the building removed will now become a public art piece to kind of tell that history of Victoria Hall. Next slide. A little close up of the Creighton Street elevation. We went through quite a few iterations of this, but introducing this mansard roof form, again, just making something that is 3 stories as a street wall feel a little bit more human scale, and really kind of defining each of these residential entrances with doors on the street, and then the main building entrances in the center of the image here. And that increased tower step back really when you're on the street will really help remove that from view when you're close to it. Next slide. Am I running out of time, Lindell? And then an elevation from the distance. We'll go next slide.
Actually don't know.
Actually. Oh, okay. I thought I was running out of time.
That's why I asked. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay. Let me know if I'm getting close, but we're pretty close to being done. This drawing just highlights that massing of the mid-rise and tower form there, just illustrating that it's kind of celebrating what's happening at Victoria Hall without making kind of a fake replication of it, even into the way that 10 minutes of that, the windows are divided at a different scale, a scale that suits a larger building, but is kind of reflecting that X mountain grid of a traditional window. And I think we are only a couple slides left. We'll go to the next slide.
Yep, you're okay to wrap up.
Great. Materiality, as I mentioned, we've got brick on the streetscape on Creighton Street side, the manufactured stone or stone cladding of the mid-rise of the tower, and then the standing seam metal roof on the Creighton Street side. Go to the next slide. And last view on Creighton Street, kind of closer to Charles Street, just showing that kind of continuation of that street wall height. And then we really did work hard to make quite a bit of division to the massing of this tower. So, it does have these kind of separations where the balconies kind of separate these tower masses to feel a little bit more like a series of buildings than one big mass building. And the tower plate of this building, in the grand scheme of things is quite small for a tower. It's specifically once it gets up to the upper level, it's lower than the center plan tower plate right now. So it is actually a very small tower plate, and it's, I think, because it's a bit shorter that it looks a bit more squat. But next slide. That might be it. That's it. Thank you. Sorry for going over time.
No worries. We didn't give you a warning, so it's all good. Any questions or clarifications from members at all? Don't see anybody in the chat, so I'll just speak really quickly. One of the pieces I was going to ask you about was the community space, and I know you mentioned that, so I won't go too in depth on that, because I know that was one of the questions I was getting from members of the community. Is that still happening because of the building being smaller? So thanks for covering that. Did you want to say anything to that?
Just that,
okay.
the commitment is there, and I think Joey and his team are excited to move that forward. And I was equally happy to see that continue to stay in, even though it wasn't integrated into any additional development rights or anything like that.
Right. So the other piece, just in terms of development, right? So understanding when the application came initially, the heritage, I guess, restoration cost was being offset with the development rights on the site at the 19 stories, et cetera, et cetera. So looking at what is proposed now, is it safe to say that what was proposed initially with the heritage restoration is still the same restoration that is going to happen today at the smaller height?
Yeah, the restoration plans haven't changed.
Okay.
Because we're getting less development rights or anything like that. There's kind of a base need to bring that building to a place of restoration.
Right. Okay. So in that sense, it's my understanding that when you've had your discussions with staff, there was a discussion about, this restoration is above and beyond, and I think we know that, and you could scale it down in order to be in more use and quotation context with the community and transition, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
So you did that work, but also still kept the same commitment to your heritage piece. So I'm just wondering, there was what was the thought of not changing the heritage restoration plan to accommodate for less rights that you initially wanted?
I think there's a lot of cost, like some of the cost in there would be something that, and Aaron can speak to that Aaron wouldn't require to consider the building being restored to a level that they're happy with it. Something like dealing with water ingress into the basement foundation and insulating that, something that's going to keep the building healthier and therefore keep the renovation lasting longer, is something that isn't an obligatory piece to restoration, but is an investment that the owner wants to put into this to make sure that the building, stays in its renovated state longer, I guess.
Right.
So I do think I know a lot of that pricing was done pre-COVID as well. So I'm not sure how off the mark that number is. So I'd be curious what the pricing would come back with today. But yeah, I'm not sure if Joey has checked in to see how those numbers are doing with Austin. But and these are these are custom made wood windows. This is a really special level of renovation that they're putting into it. So I am excited about that. I think it deserves that attention.
Right. Good point on the cost of the construction. And the last question I had was one that I heard from some of the neighbors around the traffic and the increase of people in parking, et cetera, et cetera. So there was a traffic study done, and the staff report references that there are no concerns with this proposal in traffic conditions. I'm just wondering if you can just expand a little bit on the report that was done and how it came to those conclusions, and that's it for me.
Yeah, maybe I'll touch that one.
Yeah,
I'll also want to send out regrets. Philippa, who was the project architect for this, that you met all the way through this, she's in the States at a wedding tonight and was disappointed she couldn't come, but she'll be here next time. Roger Boychuk.
It's her wedding, so it's a good thing. She didn't miss it.
So Roger Boychuk, transportation engineer in our office, went through, did a detailed traffic study on this, and found that the relatively low volumes and the low amount of parking, there's only 62 parking spaces in here, and the high degree of modality in this building, you can walk and cycle to work in a couple of minutes or jump on a bus, that there wasn't expected to be any significant traffic impacts from this building.
Okay, thank you. All right, no one else has chimed in, so appreciate you both for providing that presentation. So I'm just going to try to get up my agenda here. Can anyone hear the birds in the background? Is it Okay, there's like something, it's like a bird party in the background, and I'm happy you can't hear it because it's very loud here. Just making sure that I wasn't going to interrupt that. So we're going to go to the public hearing piece and the speakers who have signed up. And any member of the public who has registered with the clerk's office on this matter will be given 5 minutes to address the topic. When I call your name, you may unmute your mic and begin speaking. Once you finish your comments and answer any questions or clarifications, please hang up your phone or leave the Zoom meeting and watch the rest of the meeting using the webcast. The link is available on halifax.ca agenda page for this meeting. So we will start with the first speaker, and I'll say the speaker after, just so that person can get ready. So first speaker we have up is Bruce Bottomley, and then after that we have Hillary Hagley. Sorry if I pronounced your name incorrectly. So Bruce Bottomley, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you and we can see you. You have 5 minutes.
Okay, great. Hi, Lindell. Thanks so much. I live right on the property on Creighton Street. I'm at 2483 Creighton Street, adjacent to this property that is being considered. Listening to the presentation, I'm most grateful for the information. I didn't hear much about the heritage, however. I heard how the design has changed, but I haven't heard much about the human heritage. You know, this is predominantly a Black Nova Scotian sort of community historically, and I wonder if there was any history of racism or anything like that that might put a sort of a negative impression on Victoria Hall being renovated and brought back to its glory. To me, it seems like a bit of whitewashing of history, you know, like we have to demonstrate how much we respect things that happened in the past. I'm confused by it. I'm confused by the whole historical context of Victoria Manor. The planning policy 6.8, where you're forced to design around the heritage property and perhaps make many compromises on design and ideas that might help you move forward. You're sort of restrained because of this heritage property. To me, Victoria Hall looks like a dump. Sorry to say, it looks like a dump. And you're going to put a building on it, and it's going to be great. I don't see it, guys. You're not helping me. So anyway, enough ranting. Just wanted to let you know that this building right next to the proposed site is full of single parent families. There's disabled children. There's people who are struggling because of COVID. They can't move away from here. So when construction begins and you realize that you have to start blasting for the parkade, what's going to happen to our children here? Their sleep? Are we going to have to pack up all our apartments? Like, what you're proposing is really a concern to the neighbors. And listening to your traffic concerns and wind impact, those are nice, but there's real people who are struggling here, especially because of COVID. And we'd really like you to maybe take us into consideration. We can't just up and move. I lost 95% of my business because of COVID. What are we up to, guys? So I just want to keep it at that. I didn't want to rant, but you know, honestly, there are some human concerns here that I feel are being overlooked. I'm on Twitter if you want to chat. or if you want to come down, I'll make you a beautiful kimchi stew. Right back at you.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Any questions or clarifications from members? Seeing none, again, we appreciate you being here and sharing your perspective. And that's it. Thank you so much. So moving on to our next speaker, and just for Haruka, if you don't mind, just giving folks a 30-second call just so they know how much time they have left, that would be appreciated. Thank you so much. So now we have Hillary, and then after that, Christopher Cox. Hillary, I can see that you're here, but I can't hear you. Oh, there we go. I see you now. Hillary's frozen on my screen. I'm not sure for anybody else. Is Hillary also frozen for other folks?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I will reach out to Hillary, so you may move on to the next speaker, please.
Okay. So we'll move on to Christopher Cox, please.
Hello.
Yes, we got you. Welcome. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, I am here today. I'm a resident of the North End. I grew up in the North End, actually, just on Memorial Drive, and I now live on the other side of the hill on Glebe Street. I'm a renter. I'm a young person, 23 years old, and I work in Halifax, and I'd love to stay in Halifax. I support this development because it's adding much needed residential units to Halifax. We have one of the lowest vacancy rates in Canada, and I think that's something that really drives the high rent prices here that have really skyrocketed recently. And so I think that this new supply will add, much needed units to the North End, somewhere for normal people to live. And I'm happy about the affordable units that are being provided. I think the community space is also very valuable. And all in all, I just want to say that I support this development, and I think that the construction, the byproducts of construction shouldn't really be considered too much, just because that's kind of that's just the way that it is. It's unfortunate, but when you construct a building, that's what has to happen, unfortunately. So, when you're building a brand new building, there's going to be a lot of noise and things, but it's just temporary. And these 130 units will then be, added to the peninsula's stock for 50, 100 years to come.
Thank you, Chris. Quick and concise, appreciate it. Any questions or clarification from members? Seeing none, thanks again. Ms. Clerk, were you able to get Hillary on the line?
Not yet, so please move on to the speaker number 4, please.
All right, so next we have Austin Parsons, and then after our Austin, we have Alex Tattery, and again, apologize if we got your name wrong. So Austin Parsons, are you here? Let me just do a quick look in the meeting. I don't see Austin Parsons.
Hello.
Oh, hello. Here we are. All right, we got you. All right, welcome.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to speak this evening. As was said earlier by Chris, my name is Austin Parsons. I have a company called Parsons Heritage Works, and in a spirit of transparency, I was involved in writing the Heritage Impact Statement. And as Chris pointed out, my focus was on the scope of work and the estimate about the work to be done. And what I wanted to talk about now is knowing the possibility of what can happen from a technical side with Victoria Hall, and how that can be used as a good practice example on a go-forward basis. In addition to the heritage elements everyone talked about, when I look at a heritage building, you look at it from safety point of view, an accessibility point of view, a energy efficiency point of view, and a durability point of view. We did spend some time in understanding the building and recognizing that in addition to the heritage elements, the character defining elements we would like to conserve, there is a durability issue with moisture in the building, and you could actually see that in some of the slides of Chris's of the front facade of the building in terms of peeling paint, et cetera, et cetera. One other thing that we need to recognize is that we have to deal with energy efficiency, and in a night like this, we also have to deal with cooling and comfort in the building. We all recognize that we all are in changing times, and the work done on this building, as Chris suggested, will last at least through 2030, at least through 2050, at least through all the projected climate change issues we're going to deal with as a society. So these are the things that have to be considered in this conservation work. The other thing you got to recognize is in this changing times, there's also a threat to conservation itself and the loss of historic fabric in buildings because of the push or the emphasis on reducing carbon footprints, et cetera, et cetera. There's the real likelihood that if we don't think about how to best conserve these buildings, we would be losing heritage fabric. And that's a threat to heritage conservation in general, and something that we can address in this example. But what I want to leave you with is that, you know, the fact that there isn't going to be an investment in this building. Everything that I've talked about right now can be translated into a practice, into an actual example. And that's really the best way to learn and create precedent, not only for this building, but precedent for the larger community. So really what the message I want to leave you with is that because of Joey's commitment to spend the money on the conservation of this building, is providing an opportunity, not just for him, but also for the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Not seeing anyone in the chat. I just had a really quick question, clarification following up to the question about the cost. So understanding you do that heritage conservation work, have you seen the same trend with construction costs happening with heritage conservation work as well?
Wendell, I didn't quite hear the question. Is cost rising? Was that your?
Yeah, with the same as we're seeing with construction.
Yeah, I mean it will. I mean, I don't know how much it's going to rise. I did not do a new cost estimate, but costs in our job has risen. You know, well, it's been spiking, right? You know, when wood was high, we had to pay high wood prices, and the work we quoted after that was high, but now wood is low. So you know, it is. We do. So we have large supply chain issues that we're still dealing with the shock of COVID, and we just have to see how that filters out. So, but if it goes back to pre-COVID, then no, there wouldn't be any change in price. But, you know, if there is a COVID shock, then that has to be adjusted for. Same with issues of labor. You know, I know people in the community want to work on the project, and it would provide some an opportunity to learn. I'm not saying I'm going to be doing the work, but whoever's doing the work would provide them with an opportunity to learn the conservation practice and conservation craftsmanship. So that's a good thing.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So seeing no one else, appreciate you being here this evening, and we'll go on to our next speaker. Thanks again.
Thank you.
So Hillary
Mr. Chair?
Yep.
Hillary is back.
Okay, great. So Hillary, are you with us? If you're speaking, I cannot hear you. Yeah, nothing on my end. Maybe we can do a call-in for Hillary. Oh, I see your name. And you're on mute. All right, you're off mute now. No, we still can't hear you. Maybe, Haruka, can you pass along the call-in number?
Sure.
Maybe that will.
Hi, folks.
Oh, no, we lost you again.
I have no clue what's happening with my technology.
Yeah, you keep popping in and out. So maybe Haruka will pass you the call-in number, and then we'll get you next time on the phone. Sorry, I'm not sure what's happening either. So while we get the call-in number for you, we'll move on to our next speaker, which is Alex. Alex, are you here this evening?
Yep.
All right, great. Floor is yours. You got 5 minutes.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to come on here and say that I support the development in the area. We need the units now more than ever. The developer is going to do some affordable units as well. It looks like he's put some great design in, and the work on the historical building looks good. And it looks like he's thought about the community, but the community space as well. So I just wanted to come on and say that I support it. And yeah. Thank you.
Any questions from members for Alex? Seeing none, appreciate you being here. That was quick and to the point. So that's what we always love. So appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Chair,
Yep.
the Hillary is calling in right now. So
All
Hillary
right.
should be ready.
Yep. I'll just give Hillary a moment to.
Hillary, this is legislative assistant. You may press *6 to unmute yourself.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted.
Oh, sorry, Sam. We'll go to you soon. We're just trying to get back to Hillary. Just waiting for Hillary to come back on. Sorry, Haruka, what did you say again? *6 to unmute?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Actually, I just saw Hillary stepped out from the meetings. So my apologies. You may move on to the next speaker.
All right. So Tim Richardson. Okay. So on our list, we have Tim Richardson, and then after that we have Sam Reed. So Tim Richardson, who has indicated they are back in the meeting. Tim.
Folks, thank you. Appreciate that one. Yeah, we struggled with a bit of technical issue there, but back on. Probably similar to the previous speaker again, I'm just as a business owner here and having people relocate for our opportunity here in Nova Scotia, we do struggle with the rental situation and housing. So I'm just in support of an opportunity that does put more housing, especially in the downtown core. I think that it does help as a technology company as hiring, that we have when we have to talk to our people that might be interested in moving here, and we kind of have to share that it's a bit of a challenge to find housing. I know this is not an immediate solution because it's going to take the construction, but I just appreciate that. I actually like even the comment that it was viewed that it's a downtown, and I think that the traffic study seems to pass all tests. But again, we're finding that definitely a lot of people enjoy living downtown. Our office is downtown, and whether it's walking commute to downtown or bicycle and that, I think that's a really positive thing as well. So again, I'm just here in favor for adding housing and even affordable housing to the city of Halifax.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate that. We have no one that's in the chat for questions for you. So again, thank you for being here this evening. Ruka, were we able to get things worked out for Hillary?
Not yet. So you may move on to the next speaker.
Okay, great. So we have Sam Reed next, and after Sam, we have Eric Knoll. So Sam, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess echoing Tim. just with the current housing crisis, adding 130 units specifically on the peninsula and the north end, I think is beneficial for HRM, but Halifax as a north end as a whole. With that being said, too, affordable housing. I know during the presentation, there's noted I think about 7 affordable units being offered in the development, which is nice. And then just preserving and refurbishing the historic building. I know. In Halifax, I've been here my whole life. Things can change quite quickly, and as soon as the building goes down, you might forget what was actually there. So I like that the developers dedicated to restoring and refurbishing the existing Victoria Hall. And with that being said, too, the addition with the tower component, incorporating good materiality with like stone, brick, and then like metal roofing. So I just want to kind of voice my support as a community member. I'm here if you have any questions.
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate you being here tonight. Doesn't seem to be any questions for you. Yeah, so again, thank you. And we're going to go to our next speaker, which is Eric Knoll. And then after that, we have Richard. So Eric Knoll.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, who's this?
Okay, perfect. Yeah, just wanted to come in and give my thoughts. I think this project is a great opportunity. I mean, as everybody else has kind of mentioned, we have a very low vacancy rate. I think around 1% in the city, and any new rental units downtown is a big plus because there's a lot of people moving here from other parts of Canada, primarily Ontario, and they need places to live. And I think cleaning up the Goddington area a little bit more is also a big plus. And I looked at some of the designs with the heritage building and keeping the integrity and making sure that the properties are not touching, which is nice in the back. So the new design is nice in preserving Victoria Hall because it's not actually touching. So they shouldn't be incorporating too much into the existing property. And as I mentioned, local employment will be a plus. The community room in there is going to be great for the community. And I know there was mention about a few units that will be below market. I think it was around 5 to 7 units, which is definitely a plus. So I definitely support the project. Any new properties in Halifax that is going to be able to bring new people to come and have our city grow is a plus. So thank you for having me on the panel, and that's my 2 cents.
Appreciate it. No questions in the chat for you from members. So again, thanks for being concise and appreciate you being here. So we'll move on to our next speaker. And I'm assuming that we don't have Hillary yet. So I'm going to move on to our next speaker, which is Richard. And then after that, we have Paul O'Connor. And I believe Richard is joining us via phone.
Yes. Good evening, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we got you. You got 5 minutes.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Council, for the opportunity to speak. I listened with interest, great interest, to the presentations that were made and the comments of various members of the community. I have an interest in this kind of project for several reasons. Number one, I am a landlord in Halifax, and I'm also a registered heritage property owner of a building that is a mixed-use residential commercial. And so I understand both perspectives here in terms of the need for housing and the need for additional units in Halifax, as well as someone who has an interest in heritage preservation. I can tell you as a landlord with the properties in downtown Halifax that it's never been as bad as it is now in terms of the need for additional units. I don't have to advertise for a unit. There are people who are lined up waiting for units, and it's as strange as it may seem. I mean, I'm happy to be able to fill my units with tenants and people who are looking for space. It is difficult. I have to tell you, it is difficult to turn people away. there are people who are desperate to find space. And for that reason alone, the addition of 130 units in this particular area close to the downtown core, I think is a very important project to have moved forward. From the heritage perspective, I can tell you that I appreciate the cost and the energy and the commitment and time it takes to work with the Heritage Department, Heritage Division, and development process, on top of the development process, to deal with the heritage application aspect of it, is a serious commitment. It's a costly commitment. And as someone who appreciates heritage properties and who owns a fairly distinctive heritage property in downtown Halifax, I know what's involved. I know what the cost is involved, and the kind of commitment that's required on behalf of owners to do this kind of work. And I was so very pleased to hear from Mr. Parsons speak to the kind of commitment that's required and the kind of work involved in preserving these kinds of properties in the long term. And here you have a property owner who appears to be fully committed to preserving and refurbishing Victoria Hall for an extended period of time, doing the kind of quality work that's required. And that doesn't appear to have shaken his commitment. The fact that the initial scope of the development has been reduced significantly doesn't appear to have shaken his commitment to follow through with that. And I think that's something to be respected. It shows his integrity, the integrity of the developer, and I think it's something that we should all appreciate. Those of us who have heritage properties, who are interested in preserving heritage properties, and I think that that's just a very positive aspect of this. Now, several speakers have commented on things that I was going to mention as well, and I would just reiterate, the fact that the developer has agreed to incorporate 600 square feet or so of community flex space for a period of 15 years. I think is great for the community. I don't know of any other developer or development that is incorporating that kind of putting in that kind of investment into their property and into the community. The fact that the developer is offering affordable units, as I understand it, there's 7 affordable units below market rates, 4 of which are going to be 50% below market rate, and I think another 3 are 10% below market rate. And again, the fact that the developer is doing so, even though he's not committed by law to do so, I think is a sign of he's committed to doing it. I think that's a sign of the developer's good faith. So for all of those reasons, I encourage the council to approve this development agreement, and I wholeheartedly support it. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Richard. There's no questions or clarifications in the chat. So again, thank you for being here this evening, and we'll call on our next speaker, Paul O'Connor, and then after that we have Chris Corstein. Please, Corstein. Again, I apologize in terrible names. Paul, you're up.
Hello, am I on now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm very similar circumstances to the last caller. I have 3 heritage properties, 2 are registered and in the HRM, and I understand the costs associated with maintaining and operating each and every one of them. I refer to, or like it to an old wooden boat. The paint can is never put away. In any event, when I drive by Victoria Hall, I think it's a beautiful property. To have the current owner, Joey, want to renovate to the tune of $3 to $4 million, it will be incredible. The building in back, it will be beautiful. We need more rental. We need more housing in the downtown core and HRM all over. So I can go on and continue with what I would like to say, but Richard Arab kind of touched on all of the points that I would favor. To see Victoria Hall fixed up, to see more rental stock, more housing in the downtown core or anywhere in HRM is nothing but a positive. So that's basically where I'm coming from. I fully support and hope that we see more projects like this, and because it is tough when you have an apartment and you get 100 to 150 texts or emails, and there's a lot of good people looking to rent. We just don't have enough product right now, and we need more. So that's where I am with this project and many others like it. Any more, I would be repeating what the past callers have already said. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Paul. No questions of clarification from the chat. So again, thank you for joining us this evening. And next we have Chris, and after that we have Alexander.
Hi there, good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Korstein. I'm a resident of HRM. I'm a contractor, a business owner, and a landowner here. Most of the points that I was going to bring up have already been raised by most other people here. I do think that the commitment of the developer, Joey, to add the flex space and provide something back for the community is amazing. And I think that is something that should be in most developments, but I don't see it. I've driven by Victoria Hall, just as we all do, and wonder about its fate. I'm really happy to hear that the developer is committed to the restoration project of it. I think it will be absolutely amazing. I think it will revitalize the community in that area of the downtown core, and it'll add another attraction and feature to Halifax that can only be a good thing. That's really all I needed to say. But I am definitely in favor of this development, and I look forward to seeing it through.
Thank you very much, Chris. No one is looking for question clarification, so appreciate you being here this evening.
Thank you.
I see that Hillary is in now, so we'll give it a go again. Hillary, are you there?
Hello, folks. Can you hear me this time?
We can hear you. We got you, and I'll give you the floor so nothing happens. It's all yours.
Lovely. Thanks so much, folks, for having me and for your patience with technical difficulties. And I will be clear and concise and as fast as possible for you. I'm a current resident living in one of Joseph Arab's buildings. I've been living there for about a year now and would live otherwise if there were other opportunities. I think we all understand the limitations of housing in Halifax. Our current property contains multiple health concerns, including undisclosed pre-existing mold conditions that cause copious health issues for my family and our cats and pets, a leaking ceiling in the new unit we moved into in the same building that has yet to be fixed, fire maintenance issues, including fire extinguishers that expired in 2014, blocked partially fire exits, faulty fire alarms and leaking foundations. And once we brought this to Joseph Arab's and his maintenance team's attention, maintenance still hasn't been done. And in fact, the sprinkler system was further disassembled. I understand that Halifax is in need of housing, and on paper, this building and maintenance seems like a great addition to the community, but I question the lives and the condition of the maintenance of those buildings and the potential 130 households that would be further put into his hands. If he can't maintain the properties to a healthy and safety condition currently, why should he have more properties? Thank you so much for your time. I'll answer any questions or concerns that you have.
Thank you, Hillary. I'm happy we're able to get you on the line. Any members that have questions at all? And I'm seeing nobody in the chat. So again, thank you, Hillary. We appreciate you being here this evening, and we work through the technical difficulties, and we'll move on to the next speaker. Thank you. So next speaker we have is Alexander, and then after that we have Greg O'Malley.
Hello.
Is this Alexander?
It's speaking, yeah.
All right, yep, all right, great. You have 5 minutes.
I just want to start by saying Halifax obviously is having a massive crisis with the amount of units and the demand. And looking for the perfect developer that has no flaws and maintains everything perfectly is near impossible. And if you do that, you're just never going to have anything built. Most of the other speakers have already spoke on what I plan to say, but most importantly, it's the addition of 130 units in that area. Renters in this market are currently very desperate. And in my opinion, the best long-term solution for the crisis is adding stock, specifically to the peninsula. The design of the development in general meshes quite well with the existing Victoria Hall, in my opinion. And I think the step backs along Gottingen and Creighton make the building more human scale and make it fit very well within the neighborhood. The affordable units, they're a bonus. They're obviously much needed in that area and in general. But I think the overall addition of the stock is the biggest thing moving forward. Besides that, I think everything else has pretty much been touched on by other speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander. Nobody's in the chat. So thank you for being here this evening. We'll move on to our next speaker, which is Greg O'Malley, and then we have Tony Zarefsky. Greg, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Chairman, committee. My name is Greg O'Malley. I'm a business owner, a lifelong resident of Halifax, and proudly 25 of which has been as a North End resident. I asked to speak this evening as I care deeply about the North End of Halifax, and in particular this area of the city, as well as its preservation and its continued revitalization in a manner that's consistent with both the direction of where our city's going and the objectives that it has in terms of maintaining historic properties. So I would note that, many decades ago, I spent many hours visiting residents in the original, not the original, in an earlier part of my life in Victoria Hall. So I've walked those halls well before the current owner has it, and it brings back a lot of fond memories. I just had a few comments. Some might echo what others shared, and I'll be brief if that's the case. I did want to comment that after listening to city staff's, HRM's presentation and the proponents' presentations, I would like to note that both were both very informative and comprehensive, and it gave me a lot greater insight into the project. Listening to some of the speakers as well, I can appreciate the complexities of arriving at a development proposal. An application process, going through this review process is quite complex, and I'm sure very costly for the developer, but probably a lot less costly than what it's going to actually take to execute on this proposal plan. So this is a very ambitious plan, as you heard, I think, from the city staff. The conservation plans for Victoria Hall, as detailed in the package that was available on the public site, through this the meeting for the community here, appear to be, I was noticing, like, in full compliance policy as presented in the plans, and the proponent's financial investment, to revitalize, a legacy part of our heritage seems to be quite significant, considering the number of units that are actually probably in that building. look at the conservation plans themselves, they really look to strengthen the look, and the integrity and the life of the building. I think we heard that from the previous speakers who commented on that it's going to give this building many decades of life. Well, I think we know what will happen, further deterioration to the point of beyond repair if investments aren't made. The new building, it's set back. Listening to the architect.
Sorry, just a point of something, Mr. Chair. If Mr. O'Malley, you keep rubbing your microphone and we lose you, if you could try to not rub your microphone, we would hear every word.
Oh, my apologies. I'm not touching anything. So my apologies. I'll try and keep still. So just to reiterate that the proposed building size and the changes that were made there, how it's set back, and hearing the architect's comments about the separation of the various levels to make it appear like not just one large building, but set back as several, appear to make it a very consistent design with what the community has, or that we would like to see, I guess, as designs in HRM. I guess in general, this whole project seems to really help the revitalization of the community while preserving, this historic building. So I did learn a lot today about the commitment of the affordable units being offered, the other aspects like the community space and the art history space and stuff. And, these things all do seem very positive. So interestingly, we did hear the Premier say today a comment about affordable housing. And he said that this problem is only likely going to get solved by increased supply. So I guess what we're seeing here is one step closer to helping address the broader problem of affordable housing. And we heard, a couple of speakers there speak about, I guess they were landlords of other properties, and they spoke about many applicants. And I was proud when my daughter recently came to me and said she's taking a rental in the North End. So she's going back to my place of where I grew up as a child and spent many decades. And she said that there were 25 applicants for the one unit, and it was not an inexpensive unit by what I would perceive as a reasonable price. And I was just shocked that there's that much demand. And so,
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, the 5 minutes has passed.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm just going to wrap it up and just say thank you for the opportunity to speak. And I'd encourage you to support this particular development. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate you being here this evening. And there are no members who have questions for you. So with that, I'll let you free and go to the next person. Thanks again for being here. All right, so we have Tony Zariski and then Chris Smith. Tony, are you here? And correct me if I got your last name wrong.
Tony Zareski, yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
All right. Yes, we can hear you, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of this development. I work in real estate and I'm also a landlord. I understand and know this market. It is extremely difficult for renters to find a place to live, let alone one that they would like to live. We need the supply desperately. We have a crisis. It's evident. It's everywhere. Everybody's echoing the same thing. It's basic economics. Increased supply to meet the demand. Our demand is certainly heavy, and supply is light. This development, I mean, there's easier projects he could target. The fact that he would consider investing what it takes to do such a project with Victoria Hall, and it's a commitment. It speaks volumes. 100% support this and any other development that meets the HRM's criteria. It sounds like this one does based on the presentation. I see no reason for it not to be unanimously approved. I want to thank Joey for, putting the time and effort into this. It's taken a long time, too much time, and we are so close. And let's get it across the finish line and focus on the next one. It's time to move forward. We've, the province, as we all know, just the change is needed, and it's time. Let's do this. The affordable units is an amazing touch. I can't wait to see it start. So let's get moving. Full support. Thank you for my time. That's it.
Thank you, Tony. Appreciate that. No questions from members. So we'll go to our next speaker, which is Chris Smith. And then after that, we have Blair Murphy. Chris Smith, are you here?
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you. Floor is yours.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much to Lindell and the rest of the committee for giving me some time to speak tonight. Basically, wanted to come on and just express my support for the development. Like Mr. O'Malley did indicate, both the presentation from staff and the proponent were very informative. A lot of what I was planning to say have been covered many times by many of the other speakers. Obviously, the increased units in the North End, it's not only needed, but it's an amazing location close to downtown. So the units we're putting on are actually units that would require less transportation and climate impact. People can bike or take the bus to downtown to work. Obviously, along that line, the affordable piece is a nice bonus that many people have highlighted. I like that. And I like, obviously, the preservation of the heritage component and the restoration around that as well. What I would say that's different from what other people may not have said, or haven't said, I guess, rather, is I do like the efficiencies, even within the existing 30 units of Victoria Hall itself. Just the restoration and what's being planned for that piece of the existing building, I think would have a positive impact on the utilities, the heating and cooling of the building, and the general operation of that. So I think that's a big bonus that we're not really speaking much about. I also want to bring up, obviously with the community space, people have mentioned that in the other comments, but I think this is a real opportunity to partner with the Dixon Center across the street for overflow opportunities. If some space by a community group can't be found in the Dixon Center, there's a natural space across the street that perhaps can be coordinated. I don't even know how it'd be administered yet, because I don't know if that's been planned or not, but certainly there might be some opportunity to have some synergy with the Dixon Center across the street. I know that for the provincial elections, some of the community rooms and some of the apartment buildings were being used to go and vote. So there actually is a need for these types of spaces in the community, whether it's an election or a community group or whatnot. So I like that a lot. I also think that it's really interesting in between Victoria Hall and the tower that there's going to be a public art piece to show some of the history or highlight some of the history. I believe that's what one of the speakers was saying. I thought that was kind of a neat touch. And I also think that this development marries well with what's happening in the rest of the street with the Velo and other developments closer to the downtown. It just seems to be, being gentrified as we go away from the downtown along Gottingen, and this is the next logical piece to do that. So it's nice to see the community getting the investment from developers and from other business owners that, quite frankly, is long overdue. I've been, living in Halifax for over 40 years, and it's nice to finally see some of our communities getting the investment. So yeah, that was basically the main things I wanted to highlight. Thank you for my time.
Thank you for joining us this evening. And nobody from the committee has questions. So again, thanks for joining us and sharing your perspective. And we'll go to our next speaker. Next speaker, Blair Murphy. And then after Blair Murphy, we have Khalil Francis. So Blair Murphy, you are up.
Mr. Chair, Blair Murphy is not in the attendance. However, I'd like to confirm one of the numbers that I see in the attendee list. So I'm going to unmute one of the numbers I see in the attendee list. Could you please identify yourself?
It still shows it's muted on the screen. Star, was it star 6? To unmute?
Yes.
You press star 6 if you're on your phone to unmute. I'm just looking to find out who this number is.
If one of the attendees who's calling in by phone, and if you're Blair Murphy, could you please write to clerks, my email, please? You should be able to see the phone number emails in the email you received. Mr. Chair, you may move on to the next speaker.
Okay, thank you. So moving to our next speaker, which is Khalil Francis. Are you with us this evening? I see that Khalil is in the meeting.
Hello.
Oh, I can hear you.
Hello?
Yes, we got you. Khalil.
Perfect. Hi. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so my name's Khalil Francis. And I really have a lot of the same point of views as most people who've spoke here. The units are much needed in the city. Again, touching on stuff that other people have spoke about. I'm a property manager and I do a lot of leasing and renting around the city. And I've posted units and gotten 50 responses in one day. So I know the struggle it is for people to find units in the city, and I know how competitive it is around the city, especially in the peninsula. Also, one thing I was really excited to see was the community space. Someone else touched on it. I've followed a lot of the development agreements happening in the city, and I don't think I've ever seen any developer or anybody really doing anything for the community outside of the residents of the building. So that was, for me, that was a really, really big positive for me to see that Mr. Arab was doing something like that. Also, the extent to which they're doing the preservation of Victoria Hall was is really something. I mean, how in depth they're going to make sure it's restored to how it was it is really special, especially the money he's putting into it. So yeah, I'm in full support of this building. Obviously, the units are much needed here, especially the affordable housing, which Joey's committed to doing. I think it was 4 under 50%, which you don't really see much, and then 3 or so under 10%. So yeah, especially for the North End in that area of town, I think this would be a really good to get Victoria Hall refurbished and looking up to par, as well as having the building in the back, which will bring the much needed units to the city and hopefully help out with our housing crisis here.
Thank you very much, Khalil. Appreciate you being here this evening.
Thank you for hearing.
Nobody has asked to have question clarification. So again, thank you for joining us, and we'll move on. Next, we have David Fallows, and then after that, we have Tom Jared. So David, are you here?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So firstly, I wanted to thank everyone involved in this process, as I agree that maintaining the heritage of our city is a priority, but also we need to find the right balance that allows for the increasing population and the growth of our city. So based on what I've seen tonight, I am in support of this project. So at risk of just reiterating everything the past callers have already said, I guess I'll just speak to a few things just on a personal level. So I have lived in HRM pretty much my whole life. Growing up, I did have a family member who lived in Victoria Hall, so I'm very familiar with it. And I'm thrilled to see that this beautiful building will be maintained from a heritage perspective and from a sentimental perspective as well. But mostly as a father now of three kids, they're getting to their late teenage years. To be honest, it terrifies me when I wonder, where their generation will find a place to live in Halifax. HRM housing prices have inflated to the point where it no longer seems possible that a young person can buy a house. So without projects like this one, creating 130 plus new units, my kids and their friends are going to be forced to move wherever, to the suburbs, 30, 40 minutes outside the city or whatever. So, there's clearly been a huge effort put forward. Have we seen, tonight through the presentations and through what people have been speaking of about the building. It's aesthetically pleasing. It's offering the community spacing while allowing for the increased density of Halifax residencies. And at the time, even adding some reduced rents, which will be a huge help. So, I think this project will maintain the beauty of our city while still allowing the city to grow. And, most of all, it'll be a place where our future generations will, they'll want to live and most of all be able to live. So for those reasons, I won't take up more of your time, but I just wanted to express my support for the project and leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And seeing no one from the committee, question of clarification. Appreciate you being here this evening. And we'll go to our next speaker. I'm just wondering really quickly, our time, do we need to do an extension or are we okay to keep going?
I think it's 10 o'clock, not 2 hours, isn't it?
I'm not sure. Is it 10 o'clock?
I think so.
Okay.
I'll check while you keep going.
All right. Next, we got Tom, and Tom, you are our final speaker if you are here this evening.
Mr. Chair, I confirm that Blair Murphy and also Tom Gerald are not in attendance. So I believe Community Council covered everyone in attendance.
All right. So it's going to make note of that. Thank you. All right. So that is all that we have on the speakers list. So at this point, I'll ask if the applicant wants to take 5 minutes to respond to any of the comments or concerns they've heard this evening. And okay, that's you, Mr. Mason. Yeah, so if the applicant wants to have 5 minutes to speak, floor is yours.
I think we're fine. I think everybody echoed the same thoughts we had as we were going through the design process. And I think this is the right place for density and being able to combine preserving our built heritage with addressing the housing affordability and the housing crisis. This is the place to do it. And we're excited to hear so many positive comments.
All right. Well, if that is it, we'll leave it there. And again, thank you everybody who spoke this evening, and I'll ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
Move public hearing closed.
Moved by Councilor Mason.
Second.
Second by Councilor Stoddard. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. All right. So what are the wishes of council?
Be happy to put the motion on the floor, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you.
I move that Halifax West Community Council 1 approve the proposed development agreement, which shall be substantially of the same form as set in attachment A of the June 15th, 2021 report, and 2, require the development agreement be signed by property owners within 240 days or any extensions thereof granted by council on request of the property owner from the date of the final approval by council and any other bodies as necessary, including applicable appeal periods, whichever is later. Otherwise, this approval will be void and obligations arising hereunder shall be at an end. I so move.
Second.
second by Councilor Stoddard.
Very briefly, Mr. Chair, I think that your questions were, kind of so in the technical part summarized any concerns that I had. I know this is going to be difficult for the neighbors, as the one gentleman said. It always is. All development is difficult for the neighbors. It certainly has been in my experience in District 7. The building is large compared to the building immediately in front of it, but it's not that large compared to a lot of the buildings around it. And again, it's not that often that we have an opportunity to expand a site and add a bunch of units without the full displacement of the people who currently live in those units. This one and the other one today on the McDonald's site are examples of that, where we're going to get a significant net gain with minimal disruption where we need the housing most, which is in these critical downtown areas. I really want to thank the developer for the affordable housing piece. That's something, we're starting to see. When we're not starting to see, we're definitely getting into a place where the worst case scenarios happen and people are taking the bus an hour and a half to get to their minimum wage job in the core. That's not sustainable. We need more affordable and workforce attainable housing. So very glad to see that there. And overall, I look forward to seeing this build, so I will support it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. Any other members who would like to comment at all? No, if I can, if the committee allows, I'll speak from the chair. I got a thumbs up, so I'll take it. So again, thank you everyone that spoke this evening, and applicant for many discussions with community and with I know our staff as well. The many discussions back and forth to get to the place that we are today. More recently, I've had lots of chat with residents who are in direct area about this proposal and many other aspects of housing. Of course, with everything that's happening in our city, lots of discussion around housing and the need. So I definitely support that aspect of needing to make sure that we put more supply on the market. It is a difficult thing to see is that when we create new supply, we also have to create the supply at the market or the rents that the market is demanding. And we know in this area, directly almost all around it, excluding some of the single family home, is nonprofit or low income housing, from Sunrise Manor to the housing properties, the townhouse style that are owned by the provincial housing, to directly next door, which is a nonprofit housing as well. So, I know it's going to, as mentioned, be very difficult for neighbors to see something like this go up and know there's only a few units of affordability within there. But at the same time, we don't have the mechanisms to not only support the developer into making more units, but the mechanisms to require it. So really, I've said this before and will continue to say it until we're allowed to do it. And I know the applicants on the file are in the same world as I wish we could require NDAs, but we can't. And that's something that hopefully we can deal with in the future. So, in terms of the technical aspect of the development, I really, spending a lot of time on the street for many reasons, I can understand where one of our residents are coming from, in the sense of this is somewhat of a disruption to the neighborhood in the sense of what is currently on that street line, because there are no, if we had a aerial view, there are no buildings that will be on Creighton Street in that model. The new center plan, even with that, will only allow 11 meters. I think 14 might be the highest to be allowed. So this will be large, and it will be really the only building that will be this size outside of anything new that's built. So there are concerns with that. There are huge safety concerns happening in the area around traffic. I know that the traffic study said that there won't be any issues, but I won't say which colleague it is, but we've talked about our traffic studies, and sometimes why do we do them? Because we know that every traffic study that I've ever been part of always said that there'd be no impacts. I just had a conversation this weekend with a resident who's very close to this, where they implored me to not support this because of all the people who are driving the wrong way, because Creighton Street currently is a one-way street. The street that corners Creighton Street, which I can't think the name right now, which is ridiculous, is a one-way street, and people are driving up those streets to get to their places, which is different than we've seen. So there are safety concerns, but we're not here to talk about that tonight, and we can't. That's not within the policy. So the concerns that I do have are not really within what we are asked to be discussing tonight. So it's, for me, it's hard to vote for it, knowing the true concerns that residents have that are outside the scope of this development, but knowing that if we're talking about policy, and policy only, this is in line with what staff have said and with our policy, heritage DA policy, and et cetera. So with that, I'll leave it there, and seeing nobody chiming in, I will call for the question on the motion. Question for those, wait, gosh, I had a brain fart. Question's been called. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Nay, that's me. That passes. So again, thank you everyone for speaking this evening. Thank you the applicants and staff who worked very hard to get this at this point. And I believe from here it goes to full council for a final approval. So with that, we'll move on to the next item, which is, just give me a second to get my agenda up here. 10.1.2, case 20520 development agreement for 6330-6324 Quinpool Road between Oxford Street and Preston Street. And we have no public speakers registered for this public hearing, so we won't go through that process. So I will ask that Miles Egger, who I believe is providing us the presentation, come on.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of council. Miles Agar with Regional Planning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're good to go. And we have the presentation up as well.
Great, thank you. So I'll be filling in for Mr. Sean Gillis, who is the author of the report in front of you. So today's case deals with a property on Quinpool Road that you might know as the Quinpool McDonald's and the Fitness FX next door. Next slide, please. So the major aspects of the proposal are noted here. Essentially an 8-story building with a penthouse. The penthouse portion is closest to Quinpool Road. We've got a 3-story street wall next to Quinpool Road with some ground floor commercial. And we've also got about 160 dwelling units, 160 parking spaces underground and accessed off of Pepperell Street. Next slide, please. So we're located on Quinpool Road in the heart of the peninsula, as shown here with the red dot. Next slide, please. And a closer look, we've got Quinpool Road to the north, Pepperell Street to the south, and you can see the shape of the site, which includes some existing surface parking and the existing drive-through queuing area for the McDonald's. Next slide, please. Here's a current photograph of the site looking south across Quinpool Road at the McDonald's. This is Harvard Street, and you'll notice there's a signalized crosswalk in this location. Next slide, please. Again, the surface parking lot, and you'll notice the KFC, which is eastbound on the left. I'll just note that because that is a site that is in between this site and a recently approved project that you'll see in the next slide that's under construction. Next slide, please. And there's the existing building under construction. Looks like it's about up to the 8th floor there, and the penthouse is just going in. So similar in size and scale to the building before you tonight, 8 stories plus penthouse. Next slide, please. This is looking from the rear of the site, where you can see the surface parking lot and the drive-through. Next slide, please. And some existing homes on the south side on Pepperell Street. Next slide, please. And again, from Pepperell Street, you can see the KFC, which is in between the two sites. To the left of the KFC is the surface parking lot with the site in question, and the 8-story plus penthouse building under construction to the right. Next slide, please. So under the existing municipal planning strategy, we're dealing with the center plan package A and a center designation. Next slide, please. So we're dealing with 2 zones. This portion of the site is CEN 2 or Center 2 on Quimpool, and the portion on Pepperell is CEN 1. You can see some surrounding zoning there, including R1 and R2, and also corridor. Next slide, please. So this is originating from a September 2016 site-specific MPS amendment, and policies for this development agreement were established in the lead up to the center plan. Next slide, please. So as noted here, in January 2018, Regional Council gave direction to continue processing this application consistent with the June 2017 center plan document. So as mentioned, this was a project that was given consideration up to the lead up of the center plan, and Council's direction was to draft policy consistent with the direction that center plan was taking at the time. And in July 2019, Regional Council held a public hearing and adopted the municipal planning strategy policy that is now being used to evaluate this proposal. Next slide, please. So in essence, we're dealing with some planning principles that are embedded in the planning policy under consideration: transition, pedestrian orientation, human scale, building design, context sensitivity. The report includes a summary of staff's interpretation of these policies against the development agreement. Next slide, please. Again, here is some enabling policy. This comes out of the center plan itself, which, similar to the previous development agreement you considered just before this one, it's subject to policy 1025, which allows for this proposal to be considered under the policy in place when the center plan was adopted. And here are just some of the requirements here under the DA. So to permit a mixed use building up to 8 stories, restrict the building street wall to 3 stories on Quimpool, and some other elements here in terms of a range of uses, and limit the commercial uses fronting Pepperell. So the development agreement before you includes some restrictions around land use fronting onto Pepperell Street. Next slide, please. So the development agreement itself permits residential, commercial, cultural, institutional, and some licensed establishments, including microbrewery, etc. And so again, as noted in the previous slide, some of the prohibited uses on Pepperell: restaurants, licensed establishments, banks and office, retail, pharmacies, commercial recreation. So this is the portion of the site that abuts the houses you saw on Pepperell Street. Next slide, please. And a setback and massing plan. This is included in the development agreement. In essence, you've got a 3-story street wall on Quimpool Road. You've got some 2-story elements and some townhouse sort of type forms on Pepperell Street with individual entrances. Next slide, please. And a few building elevations. So you can see the building is, there's been an effort to create a lot of articulation in the building, break up the massing with different setbacks and projections to kind of reduce the massing of the building. You could see that the mid portions of the building step in quite a bit from interior property lines. Next slide, please. So this is the townhouse style entrances that face Pepperell Street. So as you saw, the site is L-shaped. So the portions in bold for the first 3 stories are, in essence, the street frontage with the townhouse style entrances on Pepperell Street. Next slide, please. And again, one of the east elevations just showing the abutting building. And just to note here, the upper portion of the building has a significant setback from Pepperell Street of 15 meters. Next slide, please. So this went to the Halifax Planning Advisory Committee back in December 2018, prior to the holding of the public hearing for the new planning policy. So some feedback here. Council recommended approval of the project. They did recommend reducing the street wall to 2 stories on Quimpool, but in the balance of consideration with the policies that are in place, 3-story street wall is recommended and considered appropriate by staff. Next slide, please. So the staff recommendation is to approve the policy, or excuse me, approve the development agreement before you. Thank you.
Thank you, Miles. Any members request clarification on that at all? Seeing none, I will give an opportunity for the applicant. Well, actually, I guess we open a public hearing. We have no speakers this evening, so if the applicant is here to provide a presentation, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chairman. My name is Chris Skiba, and I'm speaking and presenting this evening on behalf of Dexel Developments. So thank you to Miles Agar for walking us through the development. I'm going to be really reiterating on quite a few of the points that Miles has presented. As a starting place, just like to go through some of the statistics of the McDonald's and Fitness FX site on Quimpool. So the total lot area, 3,300 square meters. We are proposing an 8-story building plus penthouse, 2 levels underground parking for a total floor area above grade of 16,000 square meters. Total number of units of 57, as well as 162 parking stalls. You'll see in our presentation an optional at-grade parking stalls that we are considering, which is 12 spots, 6 retail shops, and a total retail floor area of 828 square meters. Next slide, please. So again, this is kind of a bird's eye view of the site that outlines some of the step backs and varying heights and articulation of the building. Notably, we wanted to highlight the setbacks that we've allowed for on Quimpool Road, which is a 2-meter setback and a 3-meter setback on Pepperell Street. And we feel that these will certainly enhance the street frontage of the building and provide additional space for pedestrians and public use. Next slide, please. In this plan, we're showing the optional 12 parking stalls at the ground level. This proposed parking is to provide parking retail customers, where surface parking and street parking on both Quimpool and Pepperell are very limited. This would provide a parking option for the retail tenants of the building. Next slide, please. Again, just a bird's eye view here with showing the parking as well as showing the site as it's located between Quimpool and Pepperell. Next slide, please. So on this elevation, which Miles has previously shared, we're looking at the Pepperell Street or south elevation of the building and some of the materialities of the building. So on the street frontage, we're using a combination of masonry and traditional style shingles that would match and complement the building styles that we see along Pepperell Street. In the background and in the taller massing of the tower and L shape of the building, we're using glazing systems as well as a combination of metal panel and masonry. And that design really provides an articulation in the building, a differentiation between the different masses, and just to help break up the size of the building. Next slide, please. Here we're looking at the east elevation where we're abutting the current KFC site and TED development, and just another view of the building here. Next slide, please. Here we see swimming pool and all that great retail frontage, which we're proposing at the residential rising above it. And once again, the same materialities that we described here on Pepperell Street, although the wood look is and shingles is sort of relegated to that Pepperell Street side. Next slide, please.
This slide is just showing a little bit more of where the parking entry for those 12 spaces would be showing in the center masonry building there.
Great, thank you. The next slide. So here again, just looking at the west elevation, so rounding us around the building. And once again, just another view of the building. Next slide. So here we have just a sketch style rendering. And again, we're showing the Pepperell Street elevation, showing some of the planting proposed in the front and just giving a sense of those different materials and projections. One of the things here to highlight would be those townhouse style entrances, which are very similar to those that we used on our St. Joseph Square location on Goddison Street near the Hydrostone, which we felt like there was quite a bit of success from those. And we're really bringing that same sense and feel volume to this frontage. Next slide, please. And once again here, we're seeing just a different view of that same elevation. And notably, we can see the residential parking entry here, which is along Pepperell Street. Next slide. View from Harvard Street, looking across Quinpool of the building. On the left-hand side, you'll see the TED building, which is pointed out to be of similar scale in terms of height and how those buildings are going to relate to one another. Next slide, please. Actually, I think that is our final slide. So with that, I would like to thank you for allowing me the time to present today. And I will turn over the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mason. You have a question.
So yeah, I do. The one thing I noticed going over this, I mean, thank you very much for the presentation. We've certainly seen this evolve over the last while. My one question is that something that was new was the hope for a 12-unit parking coming off of Quinpool. And having been here for 9 years, I know the traffic authority or the traffic engineers have never approved any parking off of Quinpool for going back to the keep, right? Everybody asks for it, they don't get it. So what's your backup plan? Is my question, because I am frankly a little skeptical that's going to happen, especially given the ambitions for bus rapid transit right in front of the building. So if you could kind of elaborate on that a little bit.
I mean, certainly it's, it's a want, it's not a need in terms of needing a backup plan. If it's something that's not approved, it'll simply be used as an additional retail space. There's a lot of functioning businesses on the street that are functioning perfectly fine with the surface parking that's there. And, we're very confident we'll find a tenant for that space if it is not approved. That being
Alright.
said, I do think it is a positive amenity for the building should it be approved, because you know, as you pointed out, it's not something that's been approved and in the past, and parking is something that's sorely needed in this neighborhood.
Yeah, it sure is. So, well, thank you for that. It's good to know. I was just a little taken aback by it because I know that's what do they say? It's a hard road to hoe for you guys to get that approved. But other than that, I have no questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Mason. Seeing no one else, I'll speak briefly. My first question was actually the exact same one that you had, knowing, you know, my short time here, that our traffic engineers didn't have that, and maybe or don't usually approve that. So maybe when we get to debate, I wonder if you could elaborate, Councilor Mason, on have they ever approved any type of potential loading or offloading types of like not utility, but you know, garbage pickup, service deliveries type of things. And I'll wait till we get to debate. I don't need, the applicant doesn't have to answer that. The only other question I had is related to the comments that came from PAC. Just wondering if you, the Halifax Planning Advisory Council, I'm just wondering if you took those comments and looked at them, or committee, and looked at those comments at all and had anything to add or not. And that's for you.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Sorry, can you repeat that? You had cut out for a moment.
Yeah, the Halifax Planning Advisory Committee comments that they provided to the application. Just wondered if you had any comments on some of the feedback that they provided.
In terms of how it relates to the parking?
Or just in general, because they made a few different comments related to the project.
You know, I have to say you know, at this point, I don't think I'm prepared to really speak to that at the moment, and I apologize for that.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. I'm not gonna poke that over and over again. So thank you, and Councillor Morse, you have a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the presentation. It looks like a really modern building. Just a design question. I wonder if your group has considered anything related to green cladding. It's something that's happening a little more in other countries where they're putting up infrastructure to allow for greenery on the outside of the building. And Quimple Road is one of those streets where it's, you know, everything's very dense and there's not a lot of room for greenery. But if it's green cladding, it doesn't need a lot of a footprint on the bottom.
Look, I would say it's something we wouldn't rule out. It is something that we've looked at quite extensively in the past, most on Vic Suites. We have a wall there that we opted to install vines on the wall, and we had looked and done, you know, partnership with St. Mary's, and we've done some mock-ups and studies on green cladding walls. It's something that's of interest to our firm and that we would certainly consider. As of yet, it's been a bit of a challenge to find a good green wall solution for our climate in Nova Scotia that kind of weathers the winter and the freeze-thaw cycles that we have and stands up to the needs, you know, the longevity of a building like this. But it's definitely of interest, and I certainly wouldn't rule it out if we were able to find something that was suitable for the site and for the project.
Great, thank you. Interesting.
Thank you, Councillor Morse. Great question. So seeing nobody else in the chat, we'll move on. We have no one that's ready to speak on this item, which means there's no need to do the public hearing aspect, the public hearing aspect. So if we can have a motion to close the public hearing. I guess
Move public hearing closed.
Moved by Councillor Mason, seconded by?
A second.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Chris, I'm assuming you don't have any comments for public?
No, none at this time.
All right, thank you very much, and thank you for joining us this evening. What is the wishes of council?
Happy to move the motion, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. And Brent, also thank you for joining us. Didn't mean to forget.
Thank you very much.
I move that Halifax West Community Council 1 approve the proposed development agreement, which shall be substantially of the same form as set out in attachment A of the staff report dated May 4th, 2021, and 2, require the agreement be signed by the property owner within 150 days or any extension thereof granted by council on request of the property owner from the date of final approval by council or any other bodies as necessary, including applicable appeal periods, whichever is later. Otherwise, this approval shall be void and obligations arising hereunder shall be at an end. I so move.
Seconded by?
Second, Councillor Cleary.
Seconded by Councillor Cleary. Councillor Mason.
So yes, thank you very much to staff and the proponent for the work on this. I think it's evidence that there isn't a lot of concern remaining in the community around this. I want to point out to council, as I hinted when I was discussing the one in Councillor Chair Smith's area, that once again we are taking a one-story commercial space with a very large parking lot that's used and a very large side parking lot that is used less, and turning it into housing without displacing anybody. So this is kind of ideal. From the point of view of Pepperell Street, both this and the TED have complied very closely with the center plan guidelines, and I feel almost like the presenter, Chris, when you were saying, and it's going to look a lot like the St. Joseph's Square. It's like, that's almost like cheating at this point because people love those yellow doors so much. So certainly I feel like the experience for my residents on Pepperell Street and in the neighborhood south of there will be improved by having a street wall there instead of a chain link fence with parking and people going in and out of the McDonald's. And certainly the other infill we've seen in the neighborhood, the TED isn't far enough along to really see the impact yet, but the construction for phase 1 and 2 of the Ben's Bread has, to my mind, really strengthened the character and fabric of the neighborhood. And I'm really glad to see these coming forward. So I have no hesitation in supporting this. I think that it's going to provide much needed units. I wish we had the ability to try and require some affordable housing in there. And we, at this point, do not have that permission from the province. But we still have a dire need for units. So I support this moving forward, and I thank you for your presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Anyone else with questions or comments? Seeing no one, I'll just give a very brief comment, and it's the end of an era for the McDonald's that I grew up on going to high school. So I assume that this will get approved, and I know there's lots of history with that McDonald's for many of us on the peninsula who've been around. So again, also support the project in seeing this application go through the process. I do feel that there was a consideration of the neighboring areas. So with that being said, I call for the question.
Question
be called. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Seeing none, that passed. Thank you, colleagues. So moving on to our next item, various hearings. We have no variance hearings. We do have correspondence, 11.1 correspondence. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 8 pieces of correspondence has been received for item 10.1.1, case 22115, and it has been circulated to the council.
Thank you. Petitions, members? No. Presentations, we have none. Information unbrought forward, none. Reports, none. Motions, none. In camera and private, none. Added items, we don't have any. Public participation. So this is a portion of the meetings where public can speak on items not related to items that are on the agenda. And in order to have signed up, the deadline was 4:30, the business day prior to the hearing. And we have no speakers signed up for today's meeting. Next meeting is September 7th, 2021, and I call for adjournment. Adjournment.
Sorry, I'm muted. Yeah, adjournment, please. Yes, thank you.
That might be the record for the longest call for.
Moved everything else. I'll move the adjournment too. Thank you.
All right.
Great seeing you all.
Have a good night. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
We're done. Take care.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.